If there's one thing I hate about video games, it's a video game that tries to be a movie, and God of War Ragnarok is a perfect example of this. This isn't a game. This is a game trying to be a movie. It's a blatant example of the modern Sony PlayStation era. Every PlayStation exclusive game nowadays is trying to be a movie, and this is no different. I'll get onto why I hate this game so much in the next game, but I'm going to be listing this at the worst God of War games simply because of the amount of story and cutscenes. People that aren't familiar with me and my channel are going to be quite surprised by this, because this is a very popular game. I mean, it almost won Game of the Year, and along with its predecessor, God of War 2018, this was a huge hit. It's beloved by many people. But I'll get onto why I hate this game so much in the next game, because that game was the start of this new direction that God of War took. By far though, the worst game in the series is God of War Ragnarok, a true steaming pile of shit that does nothing but try and be a movie, with terrible characters, terrible story, terrible writing, woke shit, everything that I despise about video games, especially in this modern era. Oh boy, this is where God of War died for me, and where it died for a lot of people. Even though this new direction that God of War took was a success, with a lot of supporters, a lot of fans, and a lot of, let's be honest, fanboys who adore this shit, this was the end of true God of War. It was an absolute abomination to the series. It was nothing like the previous games, the real games that were back on the PS2 and PS3. Instead of it being a badass hack and slash game about Kratos, a bloodthirsty warrior out for revenge, killing anything in his sight, just doesn't give a fuck about anything other than sweet vengeance. It become a story about a soy boy, bearded, loser, old ass piece of shit who needs arthritis medication and a cane just to get around. He can't even climb a wall anymore without the help of his gay son. No longer was Kratos cool, no longer was Kratos badass. He was now a old ass bum looking after his gay son. And his son, Atreus, whatever the hell it is by far one of the most annoying, obnoxious, and unlikable characters I've ever seen. Of all games, the last game that I want to be babysitting some little fucking stick bundle is my God of War games. That'd be like taking GTA and turning it into a cooking game. You just don't do that. And I can ramble on all day about how much I hate God of War, about how much I hate the new direction, about how much I hate the story and the characters, about how much I hate the emphasis on the story and characters, about how much I hate the fucking changed perspective in camera, about how much I hate the new slow movement, and about how fucking shit it is in general. It's a terrible game. It's not a game, and it sure as hell isn't a God of War game. It's an abomination. It's a heaping pile of shit. And God of War Ragnarok and God of War 2018 are, without a doubt, by far the easiest decision in the history of decisions. The two worst God of War movies. Yeah, I said movies, but I guess I should say game. I actually said that accidentally, but you know what? I'm going to keep this in. I'm not going to edit that out, because that's not even a blooper. That's an actual truth right there. That's a hard, cold fact that these aren't games. They're movies for people that don't want to play games, that want some lame ass story about father and son, some emotional crap that gets fucking teenage girls all hormonal and shit, crying like they're watching some sort of rom-com. This ain't for manly men anymore. This is for little soy boys and teenage hormonal women. But now that we've got the crap out of the way, let's get on to real God of War. And even though I like all these games going forward, without a doubt my least favourite of the bunch is Chains of Olympus. This was a game on the PSP. I believe it was the first God of War game on the PSP, and I mean, it was basically just God of War, but just not that good, man. It was not very refined. It didn't control very well. It felt kind of unpolished. It didn't feel as responsive and satisfying as it should have. It just wasn't all that. It was alright, you know, to play on the PSP, but when you compare it to other games, it just wasn't all that. Another game that wasn't all that great, God of War Ascension. Once again, not a bad game. In fact, you could consider it a good game. Certainly better than God of War 2018 or Ragnarok. Don't even come close. I would take Ascension any day over those fucking shit games. But the thing is with this game is that it came out after God of War 3. And God of War 3 was a fantastic game. And what Ascension did, rather than taking it to the next level, taking it to the next step, evolving the franchise, adding more of what makes the previous games great, it instead took a step back. No longer did you have the different weapons, which all function differently, with their own unique movesets and abilities and so on. You instead only had the Blades of Chaos, but with 4 different elements. How fucking lazy is that? Like, come on, dude. What the hell were they thinking with that? After God of War 1, they started to have different weapons that all function differently and were all unique in their own ways, right? But then you take that step back and have the same weapon but with 4 different elements, and then the rest of the game was just more God of War. There wasn't anything new. You had some new enemies, I guess, like those big elephants, but it just wasn't enough, man. You can't just do the same shit and expect it to be as good as the previous. You need to try harder and do something different, you know? And I don't mean do something different like God of War Ragnarok or 18. I mean keep the same formula, keep what makes the game, but add more shit to it. Come up with new ideas, new mechanics, add more weapons, more abilities, add more shit to the game, right? It's like after God of War 3, they just didn't know what to do with the franchise. With Ascension, they didn't do anything, in fact taking a step back. And then with 18, they changed too much and made it too different, where it was unrecognizable. Not even the characters were the same. Even Kratos, the main character, was unrecognizable. So God of War Ascension, not a bad game, but with so many other options, why would you settle with just okay? Now I hate to be so harsh on this game because it was the start of the franchise, it was the first in the series. Without it, we wouldn't have any of these games. But if I'm being completely honest, I'm not the biggest fan of this game. That might be controversial as somebody that claims to be such a big fan of this series, the old hack and slash games. But I think this game is the weakest by far out of the main trilogy. The main problem with it is that it just lacks the polish that the other games have. It was seriously jank in places, especially the grab, which was a huge part of the game where you had to do the executions and shit to kill the enemies. And oh man, I can't tell you how frustrating it was playing it on the hardest difficulty, where it's, you know, you take a lot of damage, the enemies are super tanky, and you're trying to grab the enemies to kill them, and you're fighting with the game, you know? You keep on grabbing the air. It was just so jank, and it was really frustrating. And something that the other games had on this list, which this one didn't, unfortunately, was polish and refinement, especially God of War 2. That game was so beautiful to play. It felt incredibly satisfying. It didn't feel unfair because you took damage or got killed because you were grabbing the air when you're right next to the enemy because of the janky, unrefined controls. It felt beautiful, it felt fair, and it felt great to play. And then there's also things like this game doesn't have that many weapons. It only had 2. It also only had like 2 bosses, but obviously it was the first game, so you can somewhat give them a pass for that. But you know, I'm being honest here, compared to the other games on this list, this game just wasn't all that great. The lack of refinement was really frustrating. Also, the game on the hardest difficulty was frustrating too. With the incredibly spongy enemies, it was crazy how tanky the enemies were. It was a real chore to play. Combined with the terrible refinement, with the grabbing shit, the lack of bosses, the lack of weapons. Also, you had some puzzles in there which kind of slowed down the game. Wasn't really a fan of the puzzles in God of War 1. And also the platforming as well. Wasn't really a fan of that shit, man. I definitely preferred the lack of that in 2 and 3. I know that stuff mixed up the game and added variety, but it just wasn't that fun. I much preferred the combat in 2 and 3. So I know it sounds like I'm shitting on this game, but it is a good game. It was the first in the series. It's what introduced me to the franchise, and obviously it has a special place in my heart, but I'm just being honest, and this game just isn't that great compared to some of the games coming up. Alrighty then, getting into the final 3. Ghost of Sparta for the PSP. This was a great game. I don't know if people like this game as much as I do, but this was a seriously good God of War game. And for the PSP too, that's crazy, man. I can't believe that this game was so good for being a PSP game, especially after Chains of Olympus, because like I said, that game was kind of ass, dude. Kind of ass, but this game was the opposite. Even the story was good as well. I liked it with his brother and shit. The game didn't really do anything new, but then again, the old God of War games were kind of infamous for not really taking any risks. But this was just a good ass game. It was an enjoyable game. It wasn't all jank like Chains of Olympus. It was a huge improvement over that game. And it was, in my opinion, up there with like God of War 2 and 3. Obviously not as good, because it was just a PSP game. It had limitations, but you know, it had an enjoyable story. It controlled well, improved after Chains of Olympus, and it didn't have any of the frustrating shit from God of War 1 either, like the platforming and the janky controls, like I said. But this was a good game, and in my opinion, one of the best. So this was a really hard decision, but for number 2, the second best God of War game, I'm gonna have to go with God of War 3. I've played this game to death. It is one of my favorite games of all time. One of the best God of War games of all time. This game is still beautiful looking. I can't believe how amazing the graphics are in this game, and the gameplay is equally awesome. This is still one of the best looking games on PS3. I can't believe they actually managed to get that game to run on the PS3, you know. This looks like a PS4 game. Really beautiful looking game. And sadly, it was the last great God of War game, because after that we got Ascension, which was a huge step down, and then, as we all know, we got God of War 2018, which just completely killed the franchise. This was the last great game. It has some great bosses like Hades. Really enjoyed that fight. The final boss with Zeus is good. The Hercules boss is cool. It's just a great game, and in my opinion, it's one of the best hack and slash games of all time. And coming in first place, in my opinion, the best God of War game of all time, God of War 2. Just what a great ass game. If you're a fan of hack and slash games and you've never played this game, what are you waiting for? Pick it up right now and play it, okay? It has everything. It's got great music, great bosses, great weapons, great story, great visuals for the PS2. Once again, just like God of War 3, this game looks great for PS2. It had great controls. After God of War 1, they really improved the game and refined it a bunch, tweaked it, made it play a hell of a lot better. And I just have so many fond memories of playing this as a kid. And even to this day, I still love it just as much. It's true God of War. It's what God of War is all about. Violence, badass main character, beautiful cinematic camera angles, good weapon variety, a bunch of different enemies, great bosses, really cool soundtrack. This is what I look for in a God of War game right here. Not God of War 2018, not God of War Ragnarok, none of that fucking lame shit. This right here. So I hope you all enjoyed this ranking. I know it's a very controversial video. A lot of people are gonna not be very happy with my list here, but it's how I truly feel. It's one of my favorite franchises and I'm quite passionate about it, and you know, it really was a huge disappointment what they did with it, you know, but it is what it is. The old games are still great to play. I'd like to know what you guys think in the comments. Feel free to leave your own worst to best ranking. I'm interested to know, so hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Take care, everyone. Sayonara.